I think it's fair to say that Will's vocal performance on To the Hellfire blew us all away with his ridiculous vocal range and expert delivery. In this clip, Josh explains his thinking behind a lot of the vocal layering decisions and how he got everything to fit just right in the mix. Check it out and enjoy.
So we talked a little bit in the beginning of the session about how when we introduce Will, we want to kind of keep him, held back a little bit. And you get a little bit of glimpse of him here in the beginning. Yep, heavily distorted. So again with the vocals, like the guitars and like the drums and stuff, there's a lot of heavy lifting done on the hardware side of things before it hits the before it gets into my session. You can see just looking at the vocals, they're all beautifully compressed and clipped. A lot of saturation, with the Neve, and it's one of those things. I like the way it sounds, really heavily compressed, really heavily blown up. These whispers keep quiet. So it already sounds pretty good, right? There's already a good amount of compression on it. On these individual channels, I'm doing literally nothing. There's literally no EQ. There's nothing else going on. Now on the overall vocal, just generally overall, there's a bunch of different things happening here. There is some DS and enhance. Just to give a lot of that grit from his voice, make sure that that's really up front, but at the same time getting away from the S's and the sibilances that just don't sound good. So just finding a balance there that gets all that disgusting texture of the vocal without it being annoying in bad ways. Looks like there's a little bit of multi-band compression going on. Yeah, not much. Just, again, keeping things from building up in areas that can be problematic towards other instruments. You'll see that across all the things that I work on. And here's a little bit more, because I felt like that was trimming the bass, the kind of core foundation of the vocals, and then going here to sculpt it a little bit more on top of that. It just brightens it up and stuff. And some more low end roll off, because I felt like I wanted to get a little bit more out of there. And then another Pro MB just to help. I think this is if I remember correctly, this extra Pro MB was done. Let's say when we get into layers, you might not see it move too much in this passage because it's mostly one vocal. But you get into like these stacked up areas, like the chorus. Then you're starting to see it move around a lot. Because again, once they start adding up frequencies, now it's starting to compete. Now it's starting to take some of the starch out of the drums. It's starting to compete with some bass stuff. But yeah, only once they start stacking. So this is on the main master vocal bus, just to get rid of some of that junk. It looks like I have a vocal doubler on the whole thing. And just widening things up a bit. Let's hear it. Just to kind of open up the stereo image of it a little bit. Just make it sound a little bit extra, really. And this is is this kind of doing the same thing? Just overall. Yeah. Again, once we get to the point of stacking all these chorus vocals, this little compressor, really all it's doing is just like taming some of the most offensive peaks that kind of stick out a little bit much. Just to trim the dynamic range down a little bit. And then we have good old New York plate, good old waves, just some reverb space. It's nothing special about any of this, just to give it a little bit of space, away from all the other instruments and not sound so dry. And So, and then you'll see, just hear stuff like that. Here's another case of just creative mixing, right? This is a breakdown, the first one, and Will's got a lot of layers stacked on top of them. So, and it's cool. It's like we're building ourselves to this area from this little kind of like. So we go from 2 to 3 vocals. And another thing too that I'll do is I'll throw some vocals into the bus of this stereo pair. And it's just an easy way to keep this mono. So when we're doing, let's say we're doing some layering here, it's not just a straight single vocal, but it's got another layer underneath it. So it's layered, but it still feels pretty mono in terms of its spatial occupation. Once we get to the breakdown, then I'm panning things out. So you get this moment of, you go from 2 vocals here to like 3 vocals that are a little bit out to the side. So it just, again, creates more dynamics in the song. So it's just another way to, like, again, create dynamics in a song that is so dense. You have to be creative in ways to make the song not sound. It's easy for something like this to sound monotonous or just like overwhelming. And it should, to a certain degree. But within that, you still want to have a nice ride. You want to have, you want things to shift, and you want each part to feel unique. And that's a way of making it feel unique. So the part before it, this little part labeled as nasty, which is kind of like the pre-breakdown, feels stacked and narrow because it also lets the guitars are a little bit more intricate there and lets them occupy the stereo field a little bit more. The breakdown, it's chugs. It's chugs. It doesn't need to be, you know what I mean? It's chugs. So we don't need to occupy so much space on the left and right. It doesn't matter as much. Vocals need to, really cut through and really just open up in this particular spot. Okay, so how we've painted ourselves into a corner. How do we get out of it and get Will back to the pre-chorus? Because the pre-chorus now needs to sound relatively smaller before we get to the chorus, which needs to sound huge. And I had the idea of just kind of like, blending down these layers during that transition, because they do this tempo shift. I'm like, cool, perfect time for me to like fade out, because now, remember the thing I was talking about? You can only like focus on one thing at a time. It kind of uses some of those principles. What is the most stark thing that's going on here? The thing that grabs the most attention is the tempo change. You can use that moment. It's like sleight of hand. It's like a magic trick, right? Like, look at my hand over here. You won't see that. Aha, I have this pen over here. So the sleight of hand is the tempo change. So there you can blend down these other vocals. And they kind of fade out, and then I'm also giving it some of this delay. It's a way to create a transition that gets us out of that idea and into a new idea, and like you're kind of bedazzled by the whole tempo change. So you can do a few tricks to get yourself out of this corner of adding more vocals, because you don't want it to sound thin once he gets to the pre-chorus, right? So by the time it's done, I've thinned out the vocals and the layers. And we might have had a discussion where I was like, hey, Will, can you go from low? Can you like swing it, like go way high at the end of that in this transition? So that way, once we get, you kind of swing down from low here and you'll swing up above what you're going to do on this pre-chorus. So you naturally thin out your voice. I can put some reverb on it. I can put some EQ on it to like take this big wide vocal, thin it out, throw it into the stratosphere with some reverb. And then you hit the pre-chorus with a more of a high mid or something. So that way that has some natural just like power to it. But like we've naturally transitioned and got ourselves away from all of this layering so that we can hit him with a pre-chorus that feels full while also only using one vocal layer. So we can like get back to basics. And then when we hit the chorus, we can just dump them. We can dump every single vocal layer and trick in the book. So let's hear it again from this breakdown. Beautiful. Single vocal. A little.